What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco. Today, I'm joined with a special guest, Alex Rubinstein, journalist and contributor to Mint Press News and The Gray Zone. He has his own Substack. He is also a co-host of Pro Democracy Pod on Rockfin. It's great to have you back on the show, Alex. How are you?
Hey, man, thanks so much. I'm happy to be here and I'm well.
Awesome. So you just had an article recently about Bill Gates's new and diverse quote unquote board of trustees for his foundation after two of the former trustees stepped down, his former wife, Melinda French Gates, and Warren Buffett, a 91-year-old billionaire who's retiring. So one of these new trustees that you discussed, and that's in the title of your new article, is named Strive Masiyiwa, who is in who in 2007 helped orchestrate a US backed failed coup against Zimbabwe's government. So can you tell us more about this failed coup?
Yeah, so I mean, it was led by a political party in Zimbabwe called the Movement Towards Democratic Transition, which, the name itself is pretty revealing. It gives you an idea of what they were about. I don't want to speak on the government of Zimbabwe really because I'm not an expert on that subject. But I think we can all agree that US, CIA, NED sponsored regime change is bad. So that's really what I tried to focus on in my article. The MDC, the Movement Towards Democratic or MDT. Oh, I'm sorry, it's change, not transition. So it's MDC. This organization was spawned out of like a organization of trade unions, and that trade union organization was a partner of the National Endowment for Democracy. So, I mean, the U.S. had a very big part in this political party's rise to prominence in its inception, and it was led both organizations, the trade union and the political party that was spawned out of it, were led by the same guy, who has been accused of plotting with the CIA to kill Robert Mugabe. But that was earlier on when when the political party was founded back in 2000. And basically what this party did in the first years was it really pushed for sanctions against the government. Quickly, it was realized that the sanctions wouldn't work because one person told the Senate Foreign Relations Committee that it's not the same sanctioning a country like Zimbabwe versus sanctioning a country like Eastern Europe, where okay, you cut off access to bread. There's other means of subsistence. Zimbabwe's there's a lot of farmland, so people are able to survive and are not going to, start these protests and try to overthrow the government because there's no bread. There's other means of living. So that didn't work. They kind of changed their tune, but in 2007, Strive Masiyiwa, who was, just last Wednesday, appointed to the Gates Foundation Board of Trustees. He worked with Richard Branson, an organization called the Elders, which is it's funded by its advisory board, which is of course billionaires and political elites. It was a multi-pronged approach, right? So on one hand, the Elders was trying to convince Mugabe to step down verbally, through dialogue. But on the other hand, there was the MDC pushing for regime change, pushing for power sharing with the government, and there was excuse me, Strive Masiyiwa working with a bunch of financial elites in exile to overthrow the government and restructure its economy. There are WikiLeaks cables, or cables published by WikiLeaks from the U.S. Embassy in South Africa, Pretoria, that detail Strive's leadership of this campaign, say that he wants to keep his involvement a secret and list him as basically an asset. I forget what the term was exactly, but it was strictly protect or something like that, which is typically used for U.S. intelligence assets or sources. So basically the plan was to overthrow the government and to restructure its economy, try to fix the the nationalization that Robert Mugabe had instituted since he came to power, which largely involved taking farmland from white Afrikaners and redistributing it to the Black population, the Black majority. And, you know, one thing that one of the cables said was that, you know, they have to do something because he's trying to do the same thing with businesses as he did with the farms. So Strive Masiyiwa, it was a telecommunications businessman who, you know, his company is very powerful in Zimbabwe. They provide services to a lot of people there, and they're actually pretty powerful in the rest of it, in much of other parts of Africa as well. So, and you know, he's working with Richard Branson on a lot of this stuff. Richard Branson himself has tried to meddle in Zimbabwe's economy. Robert Mugabe called him a vulture. So, you know, basically what we have is a situation where the financial elite, the business class, is trying to overthrow the government for doing socialism.
So he's, in this example here, he's helped advance neoliberalism in an African country. Yeah. So that right there is something that adds to his credentials of how he can help the Gates Foundation further advance neoliberalism, capitalism. Has he done anything else to help advance neoliberalism in Africa?
I mean, it's possible that I didn't really, you know, do a total investigation into him, but I honed in on his regime change efforts in Zimbabwe, and yeah, I mean that's the extent of it that I know for Strive. But you know, I think it's really important off the bat to just point out how all of the people that have been appointed to the Gates Foundation Board of Trustees are experts in privatization and neoliberalism and austerity. So I mean that just, I think that's a strong indicator of like what public health means for them, which is really private health, you know. Yeah. So and I think that some of the other people involved are even more indicative of that. But you know, of course, him being an intelligence asset and trying to overthrow a socialist government is noteworthy.
So the second appointee for the Gates Foundation trustee is Baroness Shafiq. Sorry if I botched that. What can you tell us about her and how she's helped advance neoliberalism and why they would choose her as a trustee?
Yeah, Nemat Shafiq, she's got two names because like one of them is a nickname that she goes by, the Minouche or however you pronounce it. But she's an actual baroness, which is just hilarious to me that, you know. But she's like kind of an international financial institution wunderkind. She was the youngest ever vice president of the World Bank at the age of 35. She was with the IMF, the Bank of England, the UK Development Bank, all these institutions that you know, their whole thing is privatization and basically working as extensions of U.S. power across the globe, with the IMF giving predatory loans to third world countries. We saw that with Ecuador and Julian Assange, how like basically $1 billion loan from the IMF was contingent on them giving up Assange. You know, the World Bank and the IMF, it's worth noting, I didn't talk about this in my article, but it's worth noting that like basically Washington has veto power over their policy decisions. And both of them, while, you know, supposedly independent, are based in DC, and you know, they're extensions of US power. You know, another good example of the background of one of the organizations that she worked for, the Bank of England, is that you know, they're holding billions of dollars of Venezuelan gold, just holding it hostage and giving it to the U.S. puppet Juan Guaido. So she's like been through a revolving door of these international financial institutions, and one thing I talk about in my article is back in 2008, she gave an interview where she claimed that her family was privatized, not her family's business, her family itself. It was very strange wording. So it shows that she's got like an axe to grind against nationalization projects. And it's not just business for her, it's also personal. But she even admitted that nationalization in Egypt, where she was born, guides her approach to development. So there you go. I mean, it's so blatant, and it's like, it's disgusting to me that the left is not talking about any of this. Like, I thought we were against privatization. I thought we were against predatory capitalism, all those things. And here you have a board that represents the worst of these, of economic warfare and austerity, crushing policies against the working class, and nobody is batting an eye.
Yeah, she said her family was nationalized and that guides her approach to development. And then you said this is pretty much, in other words, neoliberalization.
Yeah.
And you're right to point out, like, why isn't the left talking about these new appointees like this Baroness, like Masiyiwa, and like the third individual, which we're about to talk about, but also the control that Bill Gates has with public health and with the mainstream media. But let's go ahead and talk first about Bill Gates and his funding of the World Health Organization and Gavi, which is the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunizations. And I think Baroness also has some ties also with public health as well, right?
Yeah. So in April 2021, she was appointed to the steering group of the Pandemic Preparedness Partnership. So PPP, which is distinct from the US PPP, which was like the loans that were given to supposedly small businesses, but mostly big business under the CARES Act. But the UK PPP, it's got a council of like all these like public health technocrats from various organizations, and it's just hilarious to me because all of these organizations that are backing this group are funded by Gates, right?
Yeah.
So and then Gates, like, and of course, like Melinda Gates endorsed the PPP. She gave the like final speech at their first meeting. This is an organization that was set up to advise G7 governments on coronavirus response. But it's like an incestuous web that Gates has woven of organizations that he funds: Gavi, COVAX, the World Health Organization, PPP, all of them kind of working together and filling different roles. It makes it very difficult to track. If I think there would be more pushback if there was just one Gates organization that like did all the things, right? But instead there's like dozens of them. So that would be a topic that I want to look more into in the future. It's just like kind of unveiling this web. But here I just focus on COVAX, Gavi, the World Health Organization, and PPP. Gavi, it's I think the most insidious part of this section of my article is two of the statements from two of the organizations. One is PPP, which basically has advocated for an increase of what they call mass adult vaccination. And so under the recommendations section of their report to the G7, they said governments and international organizations should, quote, also consider expanding mass adult vaccination campaigns for common diseases, both to respond to the very real and pressing health needs and to create regular demand for expanded capacity. So basically what they're doing, and through these supposed NGOs, is they're laying the foundation for future markets. And Gavi said much the same. Gavi says that it was basically on their about page. They say that they were started based off of an idea from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And let me just pull up that quote really quick. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, CPI, which is another Gates-backed institution involved with PPP. So, like I said, there's like tons of them, and they're all it's a very incestuous web. But on Gavi's about page, it states, quote, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and a group of founding partners brought to life an elegant solution to encourage manufacturers to lower vaccine prices for the poorest countries in return for long-term, high-volume, and predictable demand from those countries. So, I mean, they almost sound like drug dealers, like they're giving you a little bit for free to get you hooked. And PPP goes in their report to the G7, goes through this several times and actually recommends that COVAX handle this idea that that basically vaccine manufacturers should be at full capacity, running at full operation, even when there's not an epidemic or pandemic, just to, quote, keep warm the industry. So it's really sick to me that they're doing this. And the thing about Bill Gates, not just the Gates Foundation, but I mean, on one hand, he's got investments in the manufacturing, which he said has resulted in a 20-to-1 return in investment. He's got stock in Pfizer and Johnson and Johnson. So on one hand, he has investment. He has one hand in the investment in the manufacturing, another hand in the narrative manufacturing, which is his investments in the media that are pushing this, one size fits all vaccine solution. And then at the same time, he's got these NGOs that are kind of working to coordinate manufacturing between, governments, and they're getting all this money from the public to push drugs on the public that, frankly, nobody's asked for.
Yeah, and then complete silence from the media also about Bill Gates's history with how vaccines, out-of-date jabs were used in the global south, and how that led to a bunch of negative adverse events in a lot of the children in the global south, in Africa and Southeast Asia. And this was discussed in an article also on the Gray Zone by Michelle Greenstein and Jeremy Lafredo. They also pointed out that the foundation has donated millions to major media outlets, which includes NPR, PBS, ABC, BBC, Al Jazeera, the Daily Telegraph, the Financial Times, and it just goes on and on, the Guardian. And you also pointed out how the media glamorizes this man and calls him like the most interesting man in the world.
Right.
So can you what can you tell us about all that?
Well, before we get to that, I just want to point out one more thing. Like another organization founded by Gates and Gavi, which is funded by Gates, and they credit Gates for their inception. And the World Health Organization is another founder of this organization, COVAX, World Health Organization funded by Gates. The partner, the founding partner that they use to actually administer vaccines in the global south is UNICEF. And UNICEF, guess what? It's funded by Bill Gates. So
tentacles just extend everywhere.
yeah. I mean, and you see this with the Gates Fund. There's like a handful of oligarchs where, like, any NGO that you go to their donors, and you're gonna see that name. You have George Soros, you have Pierre Omidyar, you have Bill Gates, you have Craig Newmark, to a large degree, the founder of Craigslist, Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn. All these people that basically, I mean, our ruling class right now is made up of people who either were very early winners of the tech boom, or basically used computers to create products that we already have. So look at Jeff Bezos, look at Craig Newmark of Craigslist, look at Mark Zuckerberg, or all these people. And you see that, like, what is Amazon? Like, Amazon is like a marketplace, but it's online. Facebook has the marketplace. Facebook is a means of communication. We had communication before, now it's online. You look at Craigslist, it's the same thing. You look at Piero Midyar, who got rich off eBay. What is eBay? It's a fucking marketplace. So I mean, they didn't really. I mean, Bill Gates, to his credit, like, created Microsoft, and they did a lot. I think there's been a lot of accusations of him, like, stealing his ideas and stuff in the early days. I don't know too much about that, but like, most of these people that are like running the nonprofit industrial complex are, they just had the brilliant idea of doing what humans have always done, but on the internet.
It's a great point. Like, these are platforms that could be nationalized. Like, it could be free to the public. Like Amazon, like you said, it's a marketplace. These social media platforms in which these tech giants are making so much money off of, like, that could be nationalized too. Like, it could be open to the public. But
Right.
and like you pointed out, they knew how to scheme and profit off of stuff that we have already been doing for millennia.
Yeah.
And now there's no criticism about this because they have the mainstream media bought off. So
Right.
what can you tell us about Bill Gates and his involvement with mainstream media?
Well, Alan MacLeod over at Mint Press did a fantastic article about his. I actually, I'm a little rusty on the details, but I mean, I think. Well, look, you see. Let me pull up his article. Let's see here.
Alan MacLeod mentions that
MacLeod,
Bill Gates can he has like a say in what, I can't remember which board it was in The Guardian, but pretty much has control in all that.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. All these, like, mainstream media doesn't make money anymore, right? Like, they just don't. There's like not a lot of. Okay, so here's from Alan's article. This is perfect. Awards directly to media outlets from the Gates Foundation. NPR, more than 24 million. The Guardian, more than 12 million. Cascade Public Media, more than 10 million. Public Radio International, more than 7 million. The Conversation, more than 6 million. Univision, more than 5 million. Der Spiegel, more than 5 million. Project Syndicate, more than 5. Education Week, more than 4. I mean, NBC Universal Group, more than $4 million. National Media Group, it's in Kenya, more than 4. So El País, which is like a huge Spanish newspaper, almost 4 million. BBC, more than 3.5 million. CNN, more than 3.5 million. I mean, so, like, of course, we could continue down this list. There's like 40 more to go through.
Those are only some,
but I think people get the idea.
Yeah, and how is he's trying to branch out even to other countries there, like what was mentioned, Kenya, but Univision, like trying to paint this positive picture of Bill Gates to the Spanish-speaking immigrants that come here.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and Univision's, it's not just for Spanish-speaking communities in the U.S. It's all over Latin America.
That too, yeah.
So, I mean, he, like I said, the best way to put it is that he has a hand in the pie of actual vaccine manufacturing, and he has a hand in the pie of narrative manufacturing and consent manufacturing. And then he's got a hand in all these NGOs that, basically do a lot of the work to coordinate the response between governments and public messaging, because it's the people that work in the media are kind of too dumb oftentimes to invent their own narratives, so they get them from the think tanks and the nonprofits and stuff. Just a little bit of insight from someone who's worked in media. It's like, if you want to criticize another country, well, you can't just like say, unless you've had a reporter on the ground, which is expensive. You say, well, Amnesty International said, or Human Rights Watch said. So these are nonprofits and funded by the same foundations that the media is getting money from, and also these fact-checking organizations. That's another topic that I'd like to look into in the future. Is just like, who's funding these, where are they coming from? because and I think it's so funny because there's billions of dollars being poured into this new industry since 2016 that I think has very little influence outside of like the media, right?
Yeah.
Like the media was already able to say we don't believe this or this is fake news, right?
Yeah.
CNN's been doing that for years, whatever. So now they have this like new veneer of legitimacy through these fact-checking organizations that are like $1 billion operation. And like, I don't think it's persuaded anyone. Do you know anyone that's like, oh yeah, well, I read it on Snopes that like this is fake.
I can't even tell on mainstream on social media platforms because I know there's a lot of bot armies that promote that.
Right.
I just want to refer people because we're going to go more in depth with this in the Convo Couch panel, which Alex and I are going to be a part of. The Trusted News Initiative, which brings together Facebook, Reuters, all these fact-checking sites, the BBC. They are coming together to try to fact check these narratives about the Rona that goes against what the mainstream media and the CDC are saying. There's a huge conflict of interest there because Bill Gates funds a lot of these media outlets. But I want to point out also that these fact checkers are legally op-eds. Like they're just putting their opinions out. It's not really just a fact. It's subjective material. And that's an argument that Facebook used in a court lawsuit against John Stossel, an investigative journalist, in which they said that third parties that they use for fact checking is just they should have protected opinion. Right. So that's what these platforms, which are banning people, are using to kick people off. It's all based off of subjective opinion.
Legally speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was hilarious. I saw one fact check that, cited the fact that Tucker Carlson's show is legally opinion. And I'm like, okay, but so is Rachel Maddow's. Like,
yeah,
it goes both ways, but it's propaganda because it's lacking context, right? Like, what was the funniest fact check I saw recently was there's no evidence of mass formation psychosis. Right, like
it's a hypothesis.
Right? Says the guy who's deluded by mass formation psychosis. But again, like, look, so much of this is like it's like pseudoscience, right? Like, I'm sorry, I don't believe that like sociology or psychology are like hard science, right? So to fact check a sociological theory is not. I mean, it's just stupid.
It doesn't mean like, oh, it's set in stone now, it has to be wrong because Reuters said it. Like that's just their opinion. Same thing for the person who's proposing that theory of mass psychosis. It's their opinion too, based on observations.
Right.
So I want to
theory.
Yeah, exactly. I want to bring this now to Thomas J. Tierney, which is the third trustee that you brought up in your article. What can you tell us about him and why you think they may have chosen him as a trustee?
Yeah, well, he's like a finance guy. He not in the same vein as Nemat Shafiq, because she worked for these like kind of supposedly public non-governmental institutions. He worked for Bain Capital, or Bain and Company rather, which is distinct but related to Bain Capital, and they are basically like a business consultancy firm. That made a lot of money back in the 80s. Like they were like the premier business consultancy firm, and they have a very hands-on approach with the companies that they that are their clients. It's been called the KGB of consulting. They're very secretive about their methods. Basically they just like overtake businesses for self-conscious CEOs and then make their businesses profitable, and then they get a big cut. But he was young when he started there. This is where Mitt Romney came from too and made his fortune. Just to be clear, he started there as just like a partner, and eventually like he led the San Francisco office and became the president and CEO and managing world director or whatever. Worldwide managing director is the title. So he overtook the company and drastically increased its profits, like sixfold, I think. Yeah, sixfold. And made it kind of global. So, a lot of this is in foreign countries and kind of restructuring their businesses. Bain and Company also provides services to government entities and guides them on, quote, economic development and strategic sector strategies, quote, privatization, quote, change management. So all that typical neoliberalism stuff. Like literally they say it on their page for the services that they provide to public entities is privatization. So, I mean, there you go. Like the service, I mean, I just want to say it one more time. The service that they provide to public entities is privatization. So, I mean, they teach them how to not be public entities anymore, and become profit generating centers. So he's a very influential guy, super rich. He joined the board of eBay in 2003. Eventually, he became chairman of the board, overtaking Piero Midyar when he stepped down. So again, you see the kind of relation that it's a very small group of people that are just like mega wealthy and have decided that they want to control public policy and public health. If you can even use that term with a straight face, public health. So what these guys, I mean, Thomas Tierney is like a white guy, right? He's like a rich white guy, has that look, has that kind of aesthetic, if you can call it that. But Nemat Shafiq, she's like a brown woman from Egypt. Strive Masiyiwa, he's a black guy from Africa. And on the press release from the Gates Foundation, they say on 4 occasions the word diverse. Like, we have this diverse group of new trustees. And basically what this does, I mean, them all being like, highly, accoladed people in the global elite, and then also being of, African and, well, Egyptian, so African again, and then the white guy, it's like, well, it gives them like this legitimacy, the Gates Foundation, as they continue to like rack in millions, to say that, like, we're guided by experts. It's not just like this power couple who has since had a falling out, trying to enrich themselves. They have like they're like legit now, like with this like people who are supposedly going to have the interests of black and brown people in mind, and not just like be there for their own enrichment. I mean, really, that's still what it is, but they're able to like say that they're a diverse, serious entity with expertism, and I think it's worth pointing out that this is the first, like, really the first board that the Gates Foundation has had. They had Buffett on as like the third wheel, but a month after the divorce was announced, he stepped down. So they needed to really shake things up with all the bad PR that Bill Gates has been getting. Melinda's been kind of free of any kind of negative coverage. Bill Gates, it was just like revealed that he's been like creepy with his employees at the Gates Foundation. I didn't talk about that in my article. It wasn't super relevant, but and then of course like cheating on Melinda Gates and his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. So they needed a facelift, the Gates Foundation, especially as the pandemic policies, which are proving more and more to be failed, just get continued, and despite any evidence that of their failure.
Yeah, and this picture that they're trying to paint is as if, okay, now that we have a diverse board of trustees, that's going to make things better. It's similar to when the neoliberal message and the liberal message here in the US, when they're like, oh, we need a more diverse billionaires. Let's have more female billionaires, more transgender billionaires, as if that's going to fix anything at all.
Right.
It's still people, like that are diverse that can still oppress people in other countries and here in the US as well.
Yeah.
So
one more thing I should point out about Tierney, and I totally forgot about this, is that after he left Bain and eBay, he started an organization called the Bridgespan Group, which coincidentally funded by Bill Gates. But this is an NGO that basically it's like Bain and Company, their strategic consultant. This is an NGO that does that for other NGOs, right? So their clients, CDC Foundation, Ford Foundation, which people might be aware was a partner of the CIA during the Cold War, continues, like Ford Foundation's another organization, NGO. Any NGO that you go to, their donors, you're going to see probably the Ford Foundation, the Omidyar Network, Rockefeller Foundation, United Nations Foundation. These are their clients. Anti-Defamation League, funded by Omidyar and all kinds of other awful people. The Inter-American Development Bank, that's another IFI or international financial institution that just does these multi-nation austerity and neoliberalization. The International Rescue Committee, this is an organization I've been meaning to write about for a while because I have a lot of info on them, but they're also a partner of the CIA during the Cold War and worked with terrorists in Syria, basically funneled USAID funds to terrorist groups in Syria, and then the United Nations Foundation. So it's like a meta NGO, right? Mm-hmm. The Bridgespan Group, which was founded by Tierney. So I just wanted to point that out, and again, funded by Bill Gates.
So Alex Rubinstein, thank you very much for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate you. I think you're a really important voice, especially during these times with the Rona. We're gonna get more into that in the
raging
in the live
Rona
stream. Yeah, in that panel, which I'm really looking forward to. But yeah, man, where can people find you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say follow me on Twitter. It's at Real Alex Ruby. That's RUBI. You can watch my podcast with my co-host Mila Garayeb. It's called Pro Democracy Pod. That's exclusively on Rockfin. You can find me on Substack under Alex Rubinstein. You can find me on the Gray Zone. I'm on Mint Press. I freelance a lot of work there. So thanks, Frank. I love your show. You're doing a great job, and it's so important that we have people like you putting out a constant stream of counter narrative to what the billionaires and the oligarchy and the elite institutions are doing. So thank you.
Thank you, man. That means a lot coming from you. I really appreciate that. And everyone else, don't forget, you're not alone, and I know you'll stay informed. Take care.